My best friend of nearly 2 decades set me up on a date with her husband and I didn't know. I, 31F, have recently had to cut contact with my best friends, B, 31F, and D, 35M, and am having a lot of conflicting feelings regarding the whole mess. B and I had been friends since middle school, with a few years after high school where we didn't talk because another mutual friend, who I cut contact with after high school because of his toxicity, told her that I wanted nothing to do with her. We reconnected when we were both about 20. I'm not entirely sure when, but we did, and it was right back to how we were before. A few years later, I was 23, after B met D and they started dating. I was coming to terms with my sexuality and gender identity and had met my now current wonderful partners, R39F and W39M. I noticed that it was as if B was jealous of my relationship with R and W when she met them or when I talked about them. She even said at one point she thought I was changing too quickly and didn't think it was alright. I didn't really pay attention to it or her apparent jealousy because it didn't make sense at the time, and she seemed happy with D. Now, there were instances before this event that should have tipped me off to something like this happening, but I was truly and genuinely surprised by it all, to the point of feeling blindsided and hurt. If anyone is interested in hearing those as well, I am more than happy to share, but here is the main event that pushed me into cutting them off. It was 2022. B and D had been having issues off and on for a while, and while I was close to both of them and listened to each of them because they were my friends and I wanted to be supportive, I had tried to keep my distance so as not to be dragged into it. B decided to take a trip to get away for a bit and messaged me about possibly going out with D to get him out of the house while she was gone so he wasn't alone. I laughed it off because it felt like she was asking me to take care of a dog rather than her husband, but I agreed because it was just hanging out with a friend, something we had done in the past, and I didn't see a problem with it. I spoke with D, and we planned out what we would do for the day. The plan was for me to go to their house, and he would drive us where we were going. We would get snacks and food, go see a movie, and he refused to let me pay for any of my side of things, all things we had done before, so I didn't think anything of it and agreed to the plan. The day came, and I drove out there, emptied my bag to make room for the snacks we would buy, left it on his counter, and we left. We went to the store, got snacks and drinks, and then went and got fast food before the movie, just talking in the car until it was time to go inside the theater. We watched the movie, and I enjoyed it. It was Studio Ghibli's Howl's Moving Castle during Studio Ghibli Week, which is my favorite movie. Afterward, he suggested getting drinks at a local bar. I agreed since it was still early in the evening, and I was having a good time out with my friend. We went to the bar, and I sat us out on the patio with my back to the building and facing out toward the patio. I could easily see the whole area and the door leading back inside. It was a rather large table, and I expected him to sit on the other side so we could see each other, but he took the seat right next to me, where his leg was pressed right against my knees. It was odd, sure, but I shrugged it off, ordered a drink, and we talked about nonsense and work. I talked about R&W and just whatever came to mind. Somewhere around the end of my second drink, something in my head clicked: this is a date. I froze for a moment, thinking it over as I sipped and ordered a third drink. Before it arrived, he placed his hand on my knee and started rubbing his thumb over it. I left it there for a moment, then excused myself to the bathroom, where I had a minor freakout about the whole thing and wanted to leave. But my car was at his house, so I had to ride back with him. After getting myself into a better mindset, I went back out. My last drink was already there. I sat back down and told him I was done drinking and ready to head back, if that was good with him. He agreed, and we finished our drinks and headed out. The drive back was easy, if a tad long, and I lulled myself into thinking I was just wrong and maybe it was just a habit he had with B and didn't actually mean to do with me. We got to their house, and we went inside. The dogs greeted us, and I went to the counter to gather my stuff. That's when I heard him lock the dogs in the garage. My heart sank. I wasn't wrong. I stood at the counter, and I heard him come back. He asked me what I was thinking about, and I spouted some nonsense about getting home, refusing to look at him. He reached out, grabbing my shoulder, and pulled me to face him, dropping his voice and saying, "You don't need to worry about that right now." I pulled away and said no, that I loved them both, but he cut me off and tried to pull me closer again, saying, "It's okay, I got a hall pass from B." I didn't even process that until later, but I pulled away harder, saying I couldn't love them like that at all. He finally let go, saying he was just curious. I got my stuff and left as fast as I could. I kept just below the speed limit and focused on getting home. I cried on the way and once I got home. When I felt safe again, it all sank in. I was essentially date-trapped, a phrase I never thought existed, but here we are. Not just by D, but by B as well. That hurt much more than I can even put into words. The two people closest to me outside of my partners and family did this? This disrespect to myself and my relationship with my partners? B knew everything about my past with my ex and the trauma from that, so she knew how best to manipulate me. She used that against me through her husband. If I hadn't noticed in time, if I had kept drinking, knowing my past and how I react when I feel trapped, I might have let it happen to keep myself safe, and that terrified me to think about. I told her immediately, and I was so upset because I felt hurt and betrayed, and I knew I would have to cut them out. It devastated me. I guess my question is, how would you have handled this situation if it had happened to you? Was I right to cut them out of my life, or could I have done something differently?